What's going on, everyone? Vampyr Gaming here, and today we're going to be talking about the OP07 pre-release tournament. I really like to release these after I've had like some experience on it, just so I think it's slightly more helpful on like what you might encounter and to try to provide the most value. If you appreciate this kind of content, you could do me a favor, just super quick, hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. But yeah, so in OP07, we've got a lot of 2Ks. We'll talk about leaders a little bit later. But, you get this Eustace. I personally prefer to play this just because it's a 5-6 and it's semi-decent effect. It's 6k leader, but it can also save your other bodies and force them to do an attack into him. You also get these pre-release packs, which can include 2 cards that you can potentially use. You definitely want to hope for the blockers there. Of course, you're trying to win this Eustace. So let's talk about it. So first up, you have your blockers. And so any blocker you pull, you're going to want to add it into your deck regardless. Mr. Tanaka, actually kind of crazy if you hit it off of life, because that can definitely save you, even though he has no counter. And then you've got Karina. Karina's actually a huge MVP. I had Karina dropped on me and used to clear my board, and it was just very unfortunate. Karina is big. I highly encourage you to save this card for late game. Then, of course, if you pull like this Eustace kid, this 5-6, it's a great card. You definitely want to play those. Baccarat is like okay, but yeah, this one really good. 5-6s because I like to swing with them, but also just being able to play out the no counter. My goal when going into these is to try to play out these no counters if possible. But I think this is one of the good ones. Eroge is really strong too, just because you can leave one up and then his effect will give you the second one, so you can do it for the 2-cost events. And then also Caribou can be decent. Hawkins, of course, any SR you pull, you're probably going to play just because they're super strong. He is not really a blocker, but he is a 2K, so you're going to want to play Papag. And then Bart's actually a really strong card just because he's 3, and the thing about this are your 2-cost blockers can actually be removed. There's a couple of cards in the set that return 2 costs. So you got to be careful. So I very much like the 3s. And if I can play a 3, I'd try to prioritize playing that over a 2, just because there are some cards that have like a removal effect that's like a secondary effect that can remove these. Marguerite, phenomenal card. Absolute GOAT. Can't forget this one either. If you go first and you can play Marguerite, then play Ace, because this card replaces itself, and then Ace is going to draw 2 and you can cycle 2. I usually bottom deck, unless if for some reason I had like the most amazing hand, then I would like organize by counter that I'm wanting, or predict I will need. And so, but I usually just bottom deck him. And then of course you got this Sanji. This Sanji's also a great card. He's a 2K, so he's just busted. You got Chopper. Chopper's cool. But yeah, and then Gizmonda, he's the cheapest blocker next to, I think there's one other one. No, he is the cheapest blocker. So that is the one that can get bottom decked. I think I had 2 of these in my deck. But again, these 5-6s, because you can swing with them too. And if for some reason you hit this law, you probably just win if you play them. Eating 2 cards is just phenomenal. Same with like E-shows. So, but yeah, you definitely, when building your deck, first things first, you want to add blockers, 2Ks, and then bodies. Blockers, 2Ks, bodies, and you build up from there, and you want to fill out with as many heavy hitters as possible afterwards. So on that, like the 2Ks again, Papag, we've got Crocodile. Crocodile is also a body, so depending if you don't have any, you can play him. Otama, not really going to put in any work. Same with Moda, it's just irrelevant. But again, these all are 2Ks, but some of them have effects that you might use or even play, kind of like the Sanji. But then there's also Law. I had a point where I considered playing it, because if they have 6 cards, you can have them place 1 card on the bottom and you play it and then return it. So you're paying 4 Dawn to answer 1 card out of their hand. But in a format like this, it might come up. And then you do have some really strong ones. So one thing that I overlooked was just Usopp. I totally did not realize he was a 2K, so double check when you're deck building. The approach that I take is I'll pull out like blockers, 2Ks, then I'll pull out bodies, I'll count how many cards, then I'll double check through all of my cards to see if there's anything that I want to change. or if there's anything that like I had like a maybe pile. I have an absolutely not, which are usually like leader lock things and just cards that are like, you know, low power, doesn't make sense, things like that. And then I'll have like maybes, and I'll go through all of them just in case, because sometimes you forget a 2K. And that's what I had did. And then we've also got Edison, and then we've got Frankie. Frankie's actually really good. If you hit him off a trigger, it's one of those cards that can bring you back into the game. And he's the only one, I believe, that is doesn't need like the Vegapunk requirement. But then there's also, so on the defensive side, we want to take a look at events. So first off, all the red events are bait. Do not add any of these. I think these are all terrible. I actually had Keep Out in my deck. Did not realize it was Revolutionary Army, so I bottom decked it with Ace. Shout out that event. But this one, no, they're not going to have a 3K. You might be able to use this to KO a blocker, but I just don't think it's worth the space. You could add it if you think it might come up, because there are blockers that fall underneath that. So, but it's very situational. If you have extra space, you could fill it with this. But it's, yeah, you want to avoid as many bricks as possible. This card is pretty decent. It's up to a potential 3K. So there's a decent amount of 2Ks, but if you have extra event space, I would go for a 4K over this, just because you're not guaranteed. If the opponent has 3 or more characters, they're probably winning at anyways. Or have more of an established board. So do with that what you will. And then, so this card is cool. I also am unsure how I feel about it, because like rest 1 to rest 1, but it does do 5 costs or lower, and that's almost every single blocker besides Sanji. So it does allow you to answer a blocker, which can allow you to go for game on the next turn. And then, of course, more pizza. You don't want to play any like of the searcher events. Slave Arrow, I also would stay away from. I think if you have it, but you do have to return 1 card. You have to return a card, and then it gives you a 4K. So it's like, it's not great, but it's decent. If you have a bunch of low costs, maybe consider it. And then there's Snake Dance, really strong card. Highly recommend, just because it's 2/4. You can choose up to 0 to bounce. And then, yeah, a lot of these are relevant. But almost all of the Foxy events, phenomenal. This card sacked me. My friend wasn't playing it. I told him he should add it in. He was like, I don't know which cards I should add into my deck. And I was like, you should add all of these. He sacked me with all of them. So that felt phenomenal. Like it was like I was 2-5 gum. But this card, the Noro Beam Sword, the Slow Beam Sword, it lets you Dawn -1 that you can rest up to one of your opponent's characters. So you get it's a 2K, and then it rests any character. No restrictions. So you can save your life, or you can rest that blocker that's standing in your way and potentially win. Either way, great. And then Slow Beam, Dawn -1, and then you minus 2 characters. 2 characters. Well, you got minus a leader and a character, but when Eustace is going to swing twice, and you minus a character on board, you essentially just got rid of 6K counter that you need with this card. So I'm a big fan. This one, not so great. And then Iron Body, decent. Any of the 2Ks. Also Flame Spirit. And this one's like something Quasar. But the Egghead event, it's just simple. 3K on 1. Super good. You're adding this. And then also Flame Spirit, because you can rest a character. And then that's pretty much, it's a 1K, but it's for the turn. And then if they have 2 or less life, you can rest up to one of their 4 cost or lower characters. So you can rest a blocker. This card's a rare. This card's absolutely phenomenal in sealed. It's one of the MVPs. And then we're just going to kind of take a look here at the body. So there's a lot of different things. The 4 curve is relatively strong because you've got 4/6 vanillas, and then a lot of 4/5s, a couple 4/5 blockers too. So a lot of people say the second curve, but I opened a lot of going first cards. I opened 1/5, a 1 cost, some 5s and some 3s. The 3 was really like the blocker, but opening a 1, then going 3, then playing like 5 with the blocker, then going 7. It's pretty okay. I wouldn't say it's phenomenal, but I think going first is fine. If you have a lot of second cards, I think second is definitely better. But if you have the first cards, because I just didn't have the second ones, like the 6/8 and the Mihawk. But my friend, again, he opened 2 Mihawk. I was like, you play those. He sacked me with the Mihawk, played it. I'm like, it's my worst nightmare. And then you've got Afro Luffy. We'll get into those. But yeah, you essentially, any 4/5 with counter, you're going to play 4/6 vanilla is even better, so you want to make sure you include those. You can add in the 5/6s. Atlas is probably the best card because at some point they cannot be KO'd. So if your life is less and you can take a hit, but then they just cannot answer it. So it's really strong in that aspect. Gecko's probably the last card that I would add in just because he has no counter. Unless if it's a blocker, I'm adding it in. But you've got like Bonnie. Bonnie is probably the best card that you could pull in terms of like bodies that isn't top end. So yeah. And then Fisher Tiger, he can attack actives. Or just any character rather on the turn it's played. So he's like a rusher. So this one is pretty strong because you're just getting that instant value, and then they have to respond. And there aren't a ton of cards that give you instant value. And then there's like the Foxy guys. The Luffy isn't super relevant, but then you got Shaka, again, blocker. You're going to put those. But yeah, pretty much any of these Eggman ones, or the Egghead ones. I'm on Eggman's site. But any of the Eggheads, just because some of them have triggers that will add it to your hand, some of them play. But then like Jimbei, you can return a card, and then you add this card to your hand. So you get to keep the card while also using an effect. Same with like Zoro. You don't get to play him, but it's just a really strong card. And like York, all of those. Buzz Luffy here, though, absolutely absurd. Just because you get the answer 4. But the cool thing is, so you can swing 6, and then if they counter out, you can use this to remove a blocker and then like go for game. This card has a lot of utility. Same with this Luffy. I think this Luffy is super underrated. Just because if you have a lot of trash in late game, if you establish this, and one game I established it, I put it back. It gives you extra. It gave me an extra 2K, so I got to go 9, 11, 11, and it just helped me apply extra pressure that I wouldn't have had. And even if it's like 7, 12, 12, I'd probably go 8, 12, 12, maybe 9, 10, 10, just to kind of even that up. But it helps you go just a little bit further. And then, of course, these are the best cards, 6/8s. The 6/7 Luffy also, because you can swing again. I got swung again on by him. Definitely, like, if he goes to swing once, consider using a blocker to respond, just so that way, like, if it puts you at 2, because then they can't use his effect, and it takes away half of his value. If not, especially when they're at 10, it doesn't cost him a lot to use this, and he really starts to put in that work. But yeah, any of these 6/8s, you want those. I ended up playing the 6/7. I dropped this, but I don't know if that was correct, because it is just kind of expensive. If you're going second, it's fine, but any curve after that, it doesn't feel great. These 6/8s just feel a lot better. And then you, of course, have Boa, which makes any card not able to attack, which is busted. Huge. And then, of course, Basil Hawkins. Either of these two, it's very, honestly, the feel is very Luxacky. Depending on, like, can you pull the nuts? And if you pull the nuts, can you see them? So there's a huge, and there always has been, but it feels like there's a huge sense of luck here. I ended up playing a Foxy. Like, I had no top end, so I played Foxy. But honestly, going first, if you play this, going to 10 just a little bit earlier, I almost wish I did that. Had I known I was going to draw into a Mihawk and I could have played Mihawk on that turn, I would have had 2 Dawn left over instead of just 1. It would have made a huge difference because then I could have played the 2-cost blocker and really went in. But I didn't know I was going to draw that, so it is what it is. But then there's, of course, 8. And Dragon, I think if you see this, you probably just win. This card is just absolutely absurd. And then you've got Mihawk. This card also really good. If you play it on 8, even playing it at 9, if they haven't played a top end and you establish this, you draw a card. This card is going to answer any body on board unless you play a little bit more control, or even just push face and go like 11, 11, 11 if they don't have a blocker. And then, of course, you have Sabo. This card is also relatively decent just because you can KO some characters, but it's not like the greatest because you get to KO a 5 and then a 3. So if they have like a 5 cost blocker and like the 3 or 2 Bart, so it can very much answer blockers and those bodies. So it's relatively strong. You should 100% add it. You've got Ace, and Ace is probably the strongest. Again, like just those rush cards that apply pressure, but the fact that Ace can also potentially heal them. So like when you're playing as Eustace specifically, you want to put them at 1 because then they have to play defensive. But if they play this, they go back up to 2, and then you can no longer have game, and they get to go into something. So this card is absolutely phenomenal. Same with Dragon. Dragon's going 7-9 at your dome instantly the turn it's played, or he's going after your bodies on board. They're probably going to get them, or they're going to get a lot of cards out of your hand. Now, as far as leaders go, we can consider... I think Eustace, hands down. Bonnie's cool, but like if your opponent's playing Bonnie and you're playing Eustace, you just make sure you swing with Eustace first, or you swing with your body and you make sure you're establishing a threat and not wasting any Dawn, because they're paying 1 Dawn. They have to play off of their curve, and they're paying 1 Dawn to rest your leader, which is essentially paying 1 Dawn to do a 1K. And in those instances, it's okay. But if we're going to do big with our leader, we need to make sure we do big with our leader first, let them rest the body. And if we have a blocker and a heavy body and we have blockers in hand, we want to make sure that they either decide, am I going to go for the blocker? And that's signaling that they're going to attempt for game. Or if they're going to go after your body, and then they need to take that attack away from you. And so it gives you a great read on what direction that they're going and allows you to play around it. I think obviously it's still really good, but just attacking twice is so much better. Attacking twice is so much better. It's like having your own on-play rusher for whatever you want. And I think it's just arguably super strong. There is some people talking about Enel, and I think that is also... Like, I understand the thought is that they have to put on more pressure, but especially if everybody's playing Kid. I think Kid just gets there. I know the guy I lost to played Kid. I beat 2 other kids. I think Kid is definitely the most popular right now. And then you have Zoro. Zoro's always been a talk. I think Zoro's really bad right now in terms of leaders for the pre-release, just because there isn't a lot of low costs, and... all of the bodies are pretty big. You do have 5/6s, which become 5/7s, which is kind of good, but I think he's too slow. Again, I'm super on the Eustace train, but then there's, of course, Katakuri as well. Katakuri, you get the swing 7, and you get life knowledge, so you get a decent idea of what they have in their hand. And if you're going second, I could see the argument, you have that 3, 5, 7 curves, and then, say you're going second, and then you're like 4, you get to go 7, and just apply a little bit more aggression, and you get knowledge. I think a skilled player can make it work. I think Eustace is just the most forgiving and lets you do the most. But as always, I hope you found this content of value. Thank you all so much for watching. And once again, if you could just do me a favor real quick, hit that subscribe button. Around 70% of my viewers aren't subscribed. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps me out a ton. Thank you.